There is a specific kind of silence you only find in northern Michigan in October. It's not a hollow silence. It's thick with the scent of pine needles and the weight of the coming frost. I was standing at my kitchen window, my hands wrapped around a ceramic mug. The coffee was hot, the steam curling against the glass. And for the first time in 38 years, I didn't have a clock to punch or a hospital shift to dread. I had spent nearly 4 decades as a nurse, witnessing the beginning and the end of thousands of lives. I had earned this quiet. Every gold-flecked ripple on that lake was a reward for the double shifts, the tired feet, and the years of being the strong one. Then, I saw it. A flash of silver at the end of my gravel driveway. Then, the heavy, grumbling silhouette of a yellow moving truck. My heart didn't race. It went cold. You don't forget the silver sedan of a woman who once used it to block you in your own garage. That car belonged to Sandra, my daughter-in-law. A woman I hadn't seen in 4 years. A woman who had systematically erased me from my son's life until I was nothing more than a ghost in his contact list. I set my mug down on the granite counter. Clink. The sound was sharp. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight. I wasn't the grieving mother who had called and begged for a return text anymore. Those 4 years of silence had been a brutal teacher, but they had taught me one thing. I was worth more than a seat at a table where I wasn't wanted. I didn't wait for them to knock. I didn't want them on my porch, claiming the wood under their feet. I walked to the door and opened it while they were still 50 feet away.
To understand why I stood in my doorway like a fortress, you have to understand how Sandra operates. She doesn't use a sledgehammer, she uses a needle. When my son David first met her, I wanted to love her. David had always been easygoing. Too easygoing, if I'm honest. After his father died when he was 11, it was just the two of us. He was the boy who heated up soup without being asked. The boy who did his own laundry so I could sleep between shifts. He was a caretaker by nature. Sandra saw that. She saw a man she could shape, and she didn't waste any time. The shift started small. A Christmas dinner, 8 months into their relationship. I had spent 2 days in the kitchen. The turkey was browning, the sweet potato casserole was exactly the way David liked it. Extra marshmallows, slightly burnt. Sandra walked in, looked at the feast I had bled for, and checked her watch. "Oh, we already ate," she said, with a bright, hollow smile. I wasn't sure dinner would be served on time. And, Margaret, is there anything dairy-free? I've decided dairy is quite unhealthy lately. She said it so politely that if I had gotten angry, I would have been the difficult one. That was her game. She would answer the questions I asked David. She would make plans for them and tell me at the last second. And then came the phone call. The unhealthy call. "Mom," David had said, his voice sounding like he was reading from a script she had written for him. "Sandra feels your involvement is unhealthy. We need space." Space turned into 4 years. Space turned into missed birthdays, unreturned cards, and a David-shaped hole in my heart that I eventually had to learn to cauterize. Now, here they were. David looked older. The weight of 4 years of Sandra's management was visible in the bags under his eyes. Sandra was standing behind him, wearing that same rehearsed smile. And then there was a girl, a 15-year-old I didn't recognize, Emma. "Mom," David said. Just the word. No hug, no "I missed you." "David," I replied. "This is unexpected." Sandra stepped forward, her eyes already scanning my house, calculating the square footage, checking the quality of the siding. "We've been going through a really hard time, Margaret," she said, her voice dropping into a practiced tremolo. "David's company downsized. We lost the lease. We thought, with all this space you have now, we could help each other out." I looked past her at the moving truck. The driver was waiting. They weren't here for a visit. They were here for a takeover. They had found out about my sister Ruth's inheritance. They had tracked me down through my old neighbor Helen. They thought that because I was a mother, I was a revolving door. "Who is the girl, Sandra?" I asked. "That's my daughter, Emma, from my first marriage." I had been erased so completely that I didn't even know my son had a stepdaughter. My own son had lived a whole life, and I was a stranger to it. But I wasn't going to let that guilt be the crowbar they used to pry my door open. "The truck doesn't come up the driveway," I said. My voice was a whisper, but it carried across the yard like a gunshot. Sandra's smile faltered. "Margaret, let's not be dramatic. We're family." "No," I said. "Family calls. Family checks in when there isn't a moving truck attached to the conversation. I am not being dramatic. I am being clear. The truck goes, or the door closes." I made them send the truck away. I watched it back out of my driveway, the yellow paint disappearing behind the pines. Only then did I let them inside. We sat in my living room. I made coffee. I put out cookies. Not for Sandra, not even for David, but for Emma. She was 15, curled in my armchair, looking at the lake with an expression of pure, exhausted honesty. She was the only person in the room who wasn't playing a part. Sandra started her pitch. She talked about the unfortunate business collapse. She talked about the stress they were under. She was good. She almost made it sound like they were doing me a favor by moving in. "I told her it was a bad idea," Emma said suddenly. The room went silent. Sandra turned, her eyes flashing a warning. "Emma." "No, Mom," the girl said, looking at me. "I told her we shouldn't just show up. She said it would be fine because you'd feel too guilty to say no." The truth is a funny thing. It's usually the youngest person in the room who holds it. I looked at David. He had his head in his hands. He looked like a man who had been drowning for 4 years and had finally hit the bottom. "Thank you, Emma," I said quietly. I looked at my son. "David, I love you. That has never changed. But help looks like a loan for an apartment. Help looks like a lawyer to restructure your debt. Help does not look like you taking over the only piece I have left in this world. I am not opening the door to the truck. I am opening the door to a conversation." After Emma's truth hit the room, the air changed. The performance Sandra had been putting on collapsed. She didn't apologize. Women like Sandra rarely do. But she sat differently. The calculated sparkle in her eyes was replaced by a dull, heavy exhaustion. "I understand you're in a difficult situation," I said, leaning forward. "But I have to ask you, Sandra, if I had bought a smaller house, a one-bedroom shack with no view, would you be standing in my driveway right now?" She tried to say, "Of course, we're family," but the lie died in her throat. She knew that I saw through her. I saw the 4 years of unreturned calls. I saw the birthday cards she likely tossed in the trash. I wasn't her mother-in-law to her. I was a real estate solution. I turned to David, my son, my only child. "David, I will help you, but help does not look like you moving into my bedroom. Help looks like me calling a property management contact I have in Columbus. It looks like an attorney who can help you restructure your debt. I will give you a bridge, but I will not let you burn down my house to keep yourself warm." They left that afternoon. I stood in my gravel driveway, the wind from the lake pulling at my sweater.
David didn't look back as he got into the driver's seat. Sandra stared straight ahead, her face a mask of cold disappointment. But Emma rolled down the back window. She gave me a small, shy wave. I waved back, watching until the silver sedan disappeared around the bend in the road. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the lonely silence I had felt 4 years ago. It was a clean silence. I went inside, stood at my kitchen sink, and looked at the lake. It was indifferent to the drama that had just unfolded. It just kept being a lake. I called my property attorney that evening, not to start a fight, but to document the day. "You handled it right," she told me. "Most people either shut the door or let themselves be hollowed out. Standing in the doorway is the hardest thing to do."
Weeks passed. The frantic energy of their crisis began to settle into a slow, rhythmic rebuilding. David started calling again. Not the rehearsed, Sandra-monitored calls of the past, but real conversations. We talked about the weather in Columbus. We talked about his new job prospects. We were careful with each other, like two people walking on thin ice, waiting to see if it would hold. Sandra even sent a text. "I know I owe you more than this, but I'm not sure I know how to give it yet. Working on it." I didn't push. I just wrote back, "I know. I'm not going anywhere." And then, a month later, a photo arrived from Emma. It was a sunrise over a small, muddy creek near their new apartment. Nothing like my lake, but she had noticed the light. She had thought of me. I pinned that photo to my refrigerator, right next to a watercolor my sister Ruth had painted years ago. The lake is frozen now. It happened gradually, then all at once. I still drink my coffee on the back porch, even in the biting Michigan cold. I have learned not to trade the view for comfort. As I look out at the pale blue ice and the bare trees, I think about the version of me who might have let that truck come up the driveway. The version of me who would have spent this year being managed in her own home, slowly losing her soul to keep a false peace. I feel sorry for that woman. And I am so grateful for the 4 years of loss that taught me what I am worth. I didn't get my son back by opening the door that morning. I got him back by standing in it. Because love is